Hello, my friends, I'm Nora, and today I want to take you through this story slowly and carefully, because what happened in the murder of Sheila Bellush didn't just devastate one family, it exposed the terrifying truth about how far obsession, control, and silent rage can push a person, even years after a marriage has ended. You may want to take a breath with me before we begin, because this story is heavy. It's the kind of case that doesn't just live inside police files or courtroom records. It lives inside the memories of a young girl who walked into her home after school expecting to share the joy of a new crush, but instead found something no child should ever see. And as we walk through this together, I want you to picture the world through her eyes for a moment. The softness of an ordinary afternoon, the excitement of something small but meaningful, the feeling of safety that every home is supposed to give. And then the sudden coldness of a world that doesn't look the same anymore. Because this story isn't just about a crime. It's about the way danger sometimes grows quietly in the background, camouflaged by charm, money, or respectability. It's about the way people can weaponize trust. And it's about the truth that sometimes the most frightening monsters are the ones who smile the widest. So let's begin. Gently. You can imagine Stevie, just 13 years old, walking home, her steps a little quicker than usual because she has news burning in her chest. She wants to tell her mum everything. A boy liked her. A boy might ask her out. You remember that feeling, don't you? Those early sparks that feel like the whole world is shifting just for you. She was ready to tell her mum, maybe see her smile, maybe hear her say something teasing or sweet. But when Stevie stepped through the front door, something inside her shifted. That quiet instinct we all carry, the one that tells us when something isn't right. The air felt still, too still. And then she heard crying. Her baby siblings, 23-month-old quadruplets, stood alone, their little bodies trembling, their hair wet with streaks of blood. 4 tiny children who should have been safe in their mother's arms. Stevie didn't see wounds on them, and yet the sight of blood on their soft hair must have made her heart race in a way no child deserves. You can feel her panic, can't you? That desperate urge to call out, to find the one person who is supposed to make everything okay. "Where's Mommy? Where's Mommy?" Her voice echoing through the house as she ran room to room. And then, the kitchen. Stevie turned the corner and her world fell apart. Her mother, Sheila, lay on the floor, not sleeping, not moving, surrounded by a drying pool of deep, dark red. There are moments in life that split time in half, before and after. For Stevie, this was one of them. In shock, she dialed 911, her voice trembling, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense at all. And while help raced toward that house in Sarasota, Florida, a story much larger, much darker, was already beginning to unfold. Because the truth is, Sheila didn't die in a random act of violence. She didn't open her door to a stranger who simply wanted to harm her. No, someone wanted her gone. Someone who had been quietly pulling strings from hundreds of miles away. Someone who believed they were untouchable. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. When investigators arrived, they saw what Stevie could never fully comprehend in that moment. Signs of a brutal attack. Sheila had been shot in the face with a .45 caliber pistol. For most people, that single blow would be enough to end everything instantly. But Sheila fought. She wasn't fighting for herself. She was fighting for her babies. That's something every parent understands, even without thinking. When the instinct to protect your children kicks in, it's like your body finds strength you didn't know you had. Sheila got up. She wrestled. She pushed through unbearable pain. A knife was used on her next. Her neck slashed twice, her hands showing desperate defensive wounds. The attacker left her there, but Sheila wasn't ready to leave her children. Crawling 15 feet, dragging herself through her own blood, she reached for the phone, but collapsed before she could call for help. And then, silence. But the silence was temporary, because the truth was already unraveling. Investigators noticed the lack of forced entry. No broken windows, no pried doors, nothing disturbed. That meant one thing. Sheila either knew her killer or her killer knew enough about her home to walk in without hesitation. Her husband, Joey Bellush, was quickly located. A pharmaceutical salesman, a strict former Marine, a man who loved their quadruplets deeply. but struggled in his relationship with Sheila's older daughters. He was cooperative, emotional, and his work route that day placed him miles away from the scene. So if not him, then who? Someone mentioned a pool maintenance man, a young guy who had made them uncomfortable. Investigators checked him out. DNA, questions, alibis. He was ruled out. Then came another name, Sheila's ex-husband, Allan Blackthorne. Just hearing that name seemed to shift something in the air. There was history there, ugly history. A decade of court battles, manipulation, accusations, many of them proven false, thrown at Sheila to control her through their two daughters. But here's where investigators failed at first. They assumed Allan, a wealthy businessman from San Antonio, couldn't be physically involved because he was out of state. And they were right, he wasn't physically there. But power doesn't require presence. Control doesn't require proximity. At this point, though, detectives were stuck. They needed something concrete. And then, a miracle detail surfaced. A gardener, just a man doing his job in a nearby yard. He remembered seeing a white Mitsubishi Eclipse. The driver wore camouflage pants. Something about him felt wrong, out of place. Suspicious enough that the gardener memorized the license plate, not the state, just the sequence. But sometimes, the smallest pieces of information unlock the biggest secrets. When Florida ran the plate, nothing. When Texas ran it, everything. The car belonged to 23-year-old Joey Del Toro, a young man with small-time drug convictions. A lazy playboy, someone said, but not violent. Not the kind of person who would drive from Texas to Florida to kill a woman he'd never met. Unless someone told him to. Unless someone paid him. Unless someone wanted him to believe that Sheila deserved to die. Del Toro had vanished, slipping into Mexico just before authorities closed in. But his car, that was still in Texas, parked near a friend's place. And inside that car, investigators found something chilling. Camouflage pants stained with Sheila's blood. A map to the Bellush home. And the .45 caliber pistol used to kill her. It was undeniable. Del Toro was the killer. But the question that mattered most wasn't who did it. It was why. And in stories like this, the why is often more unsettling than the crime itself. To answer that question, detectives turned to Sammy Gonzalez, Del Toro's cousin, and under pressure, Sammy cracked, not all at once. But little by little, the truth slipped out. The hit wasn't Joey's idea. The idea came from someone else. Someone who showed Sammy a photograph of Sheila taken at a child's birthday party. Someone who said she was a bad mother and needed to be taught a lesson. Someone who didn't care if she was beaten or killed. That someone was a bookie named Danny Rocha. And Danny Rocha, he was deep in debt, looking for investors, looking for money. And he knew someone with money. Someone who would pay handsomely to solve a problem. That someone was Allan Blackthorne. Now let's pause here for a moment. Because this is where the story stops being about a single crime and becomes a study in obsession, in control, in the way a person with enough money and manipulation can poison the lives of everyone around them. Allan Blackthorne had every mark of success. A millionaire, a businessman, a country club member, a man who could charm anyone, at least on the surface. But underneath, there was something else, something twisted and cold. Former wives accused him of abuse. Emotional cruelty, physical harm, violent outbursts. Sheila had lived through that darkness. She had fought to protect her daughters from it. And after the divorce, Allan never forgave her for leaving him, for taking their children, for taking away the control he believed he deserved. People like Allan don't see divorce as a separation. They see it as betrayal, an insult, a challenge to their power, and people like that don't let go. As investigators looked into his past, story after story surfaced. Violence, manipulation, control disguised as charm. And then, a crucial detail. Allan had recently dropped the custody battle, suddenly and without warning. To friends, Sheila admitted she had been terrified. She moved her entire family in the middle of the night to a new state, desperate to outrun him, but Allan was already several steps ahead. By the time Sheila was found on her kitchen floor, the plot was already complete. The money had been promised. The photograph had been delivered. The map had been handed over. The man who pulled the trigger had been hired, all indirectly, all filtered through layers of people who thought they were only participating in a beating, not a murder. But at the top of that pyramid was Allan, a man who wanted Sheila out of his life permanently, a man who believed he could orchestrate a killing and walk away unnoticed. But he was wrong. Once the FBI stepped in, the dominoes began to fall quickly. Phone records, travel patterns, conversations, the photograph missing from Allan's home, the map to Sheila's new address, the connections between Allan, Rocha, Gonzalez, and Del Toro. Piece by piece, the truth came into focus. Allan Blackthorne wasn't just involved, he was the architect. And when he was finally arrested, on a golf course of all places, he acted calm, almost bored, as if a woman's death was an inconvenience, not a tragedy. But in court, the mask came off. Witness after witness spoke about the way Allan lived, the way he controlled, the way he destroyed people quietly, slowly, intentionally. The jury didn't take long. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And yet, there's a heaviness here, because even though justice was served, even though the killers and conspirators were all convicted, none of it could bring back the woman who fought so hard for her children. None of it could erase the memory from Stevie's mind, or undo the trauma those quadruplets silently absorbed. And none of it could restore the life Sheila deserved to have. A life free from fear, from manipulation, from the shadow of a man who believed she would never escape him. As we sit here together now, reflecting on everything that happened, I want you to hold one thought close. Sometimes danger doesn't come from strangers. Sometimes it comes wrapped in familiarity, in wealth, in charisma, in the appearance of success. Sometimes it grows slowly, quietly, patiently, feeding off control, resentment, and ego. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is leave. Sheila did leave. She tried. She ran across states. She built a new family, a new home, a new life. But the past, or rather, the person she escaped, refused to let her go. This case isn't just a story about murder. It's a story about survival, about the long shadows of abuse, about the courage it takes to break free and the danger that can follow. It's a reminder that leaving is sometimes only the beginning of the fight. And when I think about Sheila, I think about her strength, her determination, the way she fought, even in her final minutes, not for herself, but for her children. That kind of love doesn't disappear. It stays. It lives in memory, in the people she left behind, in the justice that finally caught up with the men who tried to erase her. And it lives here, in the telling of her story. Thank you, my friends, for walking through this with me, slowly, carefully, and with the respect this story deserves.